Evelyn Hart walked into the New York family court, clutching the edge of her coat, trying to steady her breathing as her 6-month baby bump made every step heavier. She wasn't used to rooms filled with marble floors, men in tailored suits, and women who carried themselves like they owned Manhattan. She was just a preschool teacher from a small Pennsylvania town, exhausted, frightened, and abandoned by the man she once trusted with her whole life. Grant Rhodes, her husband, didn't even look at her when she entered. He stood tall, adjusting his watch like he was preparing for a business meeting. Beside him was Madeline Rhodes, the mistress, the woman he left her for, the woman whose perfume filled the courtroom before she even walked in. Wearing an ivory coat and heels clicking sharply on the floor, Madeline smirked the moment she saw Evelyn's trembling hands. As Evelyn took her seat, Madeline leaned forward just enough for everyone around them to hear. Even pregnant, she still looks like she crawled out of a discount store. A few quiet snickers broke out behind Evelyn. Her cheeks burned, her throat tightened. She gripped the folder of medical records and bank statements she had spent all night preparing, but suddenly they felt useless, like nothing she could ever bring would matter. The bailiff called for silence. Grant and Madeline stood with confidence. Evelyn swallowed hard and rose slowly, one hand instinctively covering her belly. She told herself not to cry, not in front of them, not today. Then Madeline stepped forward, asking the judge for permission to clarify the kind of woman Evelyn really is. The courtroom leaned in. Evelyn felt the room tilt. She thought the humiliation had already begun, but she had no idea what Madeline was about to say next, or how deeply it would cut. And it was only the beginning. 2 weeks before the courtroom humiliation, Evelyn Hart's life was already stretched thin, so thin that even one more crack could have broken her completely. She lived in a small, aging apartment near Main Street in Scranton, Pennsylvania, with peeling paint, a sagging couch, and medical bills piled like a second wall. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, slipped into her worn-out flats, and drove her old Toyota Corolla to the preschool where she taught. The children adored her, but exhaustion clung to her like a shadow. Pregnancy made it harder, especially with the constant nausea and back pain. Yet she pushed through every day because she didn't have the luxury of slowing down. Her father, Henry, had recently suffered a heart episode and was admitted to the county hospital. Evelyn visited him every evening, even when she could barely keep her eyes open. She held his hand and whispered, "I'm okay, Dad. The baby's okay. Don't worry." But it was a lie. She wasn't okay. Grant had cut off her access to their joint savings, claiming she was financially irresponsible, leaving her scrambling to pay hospital fees and rent. She sold her jewelry, canceled her prenatal classes, and skipped meals without thinking twice. Worst of all, she was alone. Her mother had passed away 5 years earlier, and Grant, once charming, once gentle, had turned cold overnight. He stopped taking her calls, stopped coming home, and eventually stopped pretending he cared. Then came the final blow. A divorce petition delivered in a crisp envelope, with terms so cruel Evelyn had to sit down to keep from fainting. Grant wanted the apartment, the savings, and even threatened to fight for sole custody by claiming Evelyn was mentally unstable due to pregnancy. Evelyn clutched her belly and cried silently, terrified of losing her child before he was even born. Still, she forced herself to stand, to keep moving, to breathe, because she knew the world wouldn't pause for her grief. And yet, even in all this darkness, fate was quietly arranging someone who would soon step into her collapsing world. Someone who would change everything. Manhattan looked nothing like the world Evelyn came from. Back home, life moved slowly, neighbors waved, kids rode bikes down cracked sidewalks, and grocery store cashiers knew everyone by name. But in New York, everything felt sharp, fast, expensive, unforgiving. The winter wind cut across the streets like broken glass, and skyscrapers towered above her like judges, silently deciding whether she belonged. She already knew the answer. She didn't. The morning of her first preliminary hearing, Evelyn stepped out of the taxi in front of the New York family court, instantly swallowed by the rush of Fifth Avenue traffic. People in long wool coats hurried past her, talking loudly into sleek phones, sipping coffee from glossy cups. A woman in a fitted camel coat bumped into Evelyn's shoulder without even glancing back. Her iPhone nearly slipped from her hand. Evelyn apologized instinctively, though she wasn't the one at fault. Inside, the marble floors gleamed. Security officers scanned people with cold efficiency. Everything smelled like money, metal, and perfume she couldn't name. Evelyn clutched her files to her chest and tried not to look overwhelmed, but her breathing grew unsteady. She had never been in a courtroom this grand, and the knowledge that Grant and Madeline were somewhere inside made her stomach twist painfully. As she waited to be called, she noticed how people stared not at her face, but at her clothes. Her simple maternity dress, her scuffed shoes, the coat she'd owned since college. Next to the polished attorneys and well-dressed clients, she looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong building. She lowered her eyes, hoping to shrink into the bench. Then, a moment she didn't expect. A man in a dark navy suit paused near her. He wasn't looking at her with judgment, he was studying her with concern. His tie was neatly knotted, his briefcase expensive, and his expression thoughtful. She assumed he was another lawyer, but he didn't speak. He simply watched as she struggled with her paperwork, as if he sensed something was terribly wrong. She didn't know it yet, but this quiet stranger, Samuel Blake, was about to become the only person standing between her and complete destruction. And their paths were about to collide sooner than she imagined. Madeline Rhodes carried herself like Manhattan royalty, sharp heels, sharper tongue, and a confidence built on destroying anyone who stood in her way. She wasn't just Grant's mistress. She was the reason Evelyn's life had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece. While Evelyn was driving her old Toyota to prenatal checkups, Madeline was stepping out of black SUVs, snapping orders into her phone, and watching Grant fall deeper under her control. To outsiders, Madeline looked polished, sleek black hair, tailored coats, flawless lipstick. But behind that exterior was someone who needed power the way others needed air. She thrived on being envied, feared, admired, and taking Grant from his pregnant wife didn't bother her, it thrilled her. It proved she could have anything she wanted. Inside her Soho apartment, full of glass, chrome, and white furniture, Madeline paced with a wineglass in hand, plotting the next strike. "She's weak, Grant. Pathetic. You need to end this divorce quickly before she drains you." Grant, sitting on the edge of the sofa, rubbed his forehead. "I don't want trouble, Mads," she scoffed. "Trouble? She's pregnant, broke, and alone. She can't fight us." But Madeline wasn't satisfied with just winning the divorce. She wanted Evelyn erased. Forgotten, humiliated, she convinced Grant to file for sole custody, claiming Evelyn was emotionally unstable. Then she pushed him to restrict Evelyn's access to their joint finances, knowing it would choke her. Grant hesitated at first. There was still a shred of guilt somewhere inside him, but Madeline pressed harder. "She'll survive. People like her always survive. They're built for suffering." What she didn't tell Grant was her real fear. That Evelyn, despite her soft voice and gentle nature, might still hold a piece of Grant's heart. And Madeline couldn't allow that, not if she wanted the life she envisioned, complete with Grant's money, status, and connections. So, she prepared her ammunition, a doctored recording, a fabricated behavior report, and a testimony she rehearsed in front of her mirror until it was dripping with false sincerity. To Madeline, this wasn't a divorce. It was war. And she planned to bury Evelyn before the first battle even began. The first hearing was supposed to be simple, procedural, quiet, nothing more than scheduling. That's what Evelyn had been told. But the moment she stepped into the courtroom, she felt the tension thicken like fog. Grant sat tall beside his attorney, adjusting his suit cuffs as if he were prepping for a photo shoot instead of a divorce. And next to him, like a shadow stitched to his side, was Madeline. Madeline crossed her legs slowly, letting her heel tap the floor with calculated confidence. When her eyes met Evelyn's, they didn't hold pity or remorse, only triumph. Evelyn lowered her gaze, clutching her medical records and the small notebook where she had written every detail of Grant's abandonment. Her hands trembled, but she told herself to breathe. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Evelyn did the same, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other shielding her belly. She took her seat, focusing on the wood grain of the table to keep from crying. Then it began. Grant's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed, we have a piece of evidence that sheds light on Mrs. Hart's emotional instability." Evelyn's heart plummeted. The attorney played the audio. Evelyn heard her own voice. No, something that sounded like her shouting words she never said. "I swear I'll ruin you, Grant. I'll make sure you never see this baby." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn shook her head violently. "That's not me, I never said," but her voice cracked. Madeline leaned forward in her seat. covering her mouth with a fake expression of concern. "It's heartbreaking, Your Honor. We're worried for the safety of the child." The judge's eyes narrowed toward Evelyn. "Mrs. Hart, is that your voice?" Everything inside her collapsed, her throat tightened, knees weak, vision blurring. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. Grant looked away, jaw clenched, pretending to be wounded. Madeline dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue she didn't need. Evelyn stood there, exposed, judged, and sinking, believing she had already lost. And then, the courtroom door opened. A man stepped inside. A man who would change everything. A man who had seen the truth. That night, after the disastrous hearing, Evelyn drove back to Scranton with her vision blurred by tears. The snow flurries on the windshield matched the storm pounding inside her chest. When she finally parked outside the county hospital where her father was admitted, she stayed in the car for several minutes, unable to move. Her hands clutched the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The fake recording echoed in her head, playing again and again like a cruel loop she couldn't shut off. Inside the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed above her as she walked down the hall. She tried to smile when she entered her father's room, but the moment he asked, "How did court go, sweetheart?" her expression cracked like thin ice. She couldn't bring herself to tell him. She didn't want to worry the only person who had never failed her. After he fell asleep, Evelyn sat alone in the waiting area, hugging her coat around her belly. She pulled out the hospital bill, $4,120 due next week. Rent was late, groceries were running low, and now Grant's attorney was painting her as unstable, dangerous, unfit to be a mother. A wave of exhaustion hit her so hard she bent forward, covering her face with her hands. Her phone buzzed. A message from Grant. "Sign the divorce agreement. Stop embarrassing yourself. You won't win custody." It felt like a stab straight to her ribs. Evelyn let out a broken sob, shaking uncontrollably. For the first time in months, she whispered aloud, "I don't think I can do this." As she struggled to breathe, a paper cup of hot coffee appeared in front of her. She looked up, startled. Samuel Blake stood there, still in his navy suit, snowflakes melting on his shoulders. He didn't push, he didn't question her. He simply sat beside her, placing a clean napkin on her lap. "I saw what happened today," he said quietly. "You're not unstable, you're being framed." Evelyn wiped her tears with trembling fingers. "No one believes me." Samuel met her eyes, steady and certain. "I do." Something inside her, something crushed and buried, flickered faintly. And for the first time, she wasn't completely alone. Samuel didn't waste time. The morning after finding Evelyn crying in the hospital hallway, he sat in his Park Avenue office with his sleeves rolled up, staring at the waveform of the recording Grant's lawyer had presented. Something was off. The sound quality changed halfway through, the background noise didn't match, and the cadence of Evelyn's voice shifted unnaturally. He leaned closer, replaying a tiny section again and again. Then he noticed it, a digital artifact. A splice. Someone had edited the audio? He immediately sent the file to a forensic audio specialist he trusted. While waiting, he reviewed the metadata embedded in the recording. When the results popped up on his screen, Samuel froze. The device ID responsible for creating the file was clearly listed. It belonged to Madeline Rhodes. That alone was enough to cast doubt on the entire case, but Samuel wasn't the type to stop at enough. He wanted the truth, and he wanted justice for that trembling woman in the hospital waiting room. He asked his assistant to pull everything publicly available on Grant Rhodes. Financial statements, company filings, credit traces, anything they could access without a warrant. Hours passed. Coffee cups piled up. The Manhattan skyline outside his window turned from gray to gold as the sun set. Then, late in the evening, his assistant hurried in, holding a folder. "You need to see this." Inside were several wire transfers between Grant's company and an overseas account. At first glance, it seemed like standard business. But the amounts didn't match the company's reported revenue, and the dates lined up suspiciously well with his sudden push for divorce. Samuel flipped through the documents, his brain working faster with each page. Grant wasn't just hiding money from Evelyn. He was hiding over $600,000 from the IRS and from the court. If this came out during the divorce proceedings, the judge wouldn't just question his credibility. Grant could face charges, penalties, and financial ruin. Samuel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Madeline had made a mistake forging evidence. But Grant? He had buried himself. This, Samuel whispered to himself, fingers drumming the folder, is how we turn the entire case around. And Evelyn had no idea a storm was building in her favor. Grant Rhodes always thought of himself as untouchable. Money protected him. Connections protected him. Madeline protected him even more. But when he received an unexpected email from Samuel Blake, something inside him snapped like a weak thread. The email contained only one sentence. I know about the offshore account. Grant's blood ran cold. His vision blurred for a moment, and he gripped the edge of his mahogany desk to steady himself. Nobody was supposed to know about that account, not his employees, not his accountant, not even Madeline. He had opened it during a business expansion in Boston, quietly funneling money overseas to avoid taxes and hide assets before filing for divorce. Madeline noticed his panic as she walked into the office wearing a fitted blazer and carrying a glass of sparkling water. "What's wrong with you?" she asked sharply. Grant shoved the laptop toward her. She skimmed the email and rolled her eyes. "He's bluffing, Grant. Lawyers do that all the time." "No," Grant said, voice cracking. "Samuel Blake doesn't bluff." Madeline frowned. "So what if he knows? It's not like he has proof." Grant snapped. "He always gets proof. He was the one who won that Park Avenue fraud case in 2019, remember? He buries people." For the first time, fear crept into Madeline's eyes. She set the glass down, her confidence wavering. "Okay, listen. We stay calm. We stick to the plan. Evelyn can't fight us." Grant swallowed hard. "But if Samuel brings this to court," Madeline interrupted. "Stop panicking. Focus. Did you delete everything?" "Not everything," he admitted quietly. "Some of the transfers are still traceable." Madeline cursed under her breath. "You idiot." Their alliance, once so seamless, began to fracture. Grant blamed her for pushing him too far. Madeline blamed him for being sloppy. They yelled, paced, slammed doors, but neither could fix the damage. Samuel had already seen the cracks. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Grant texted Evelyn for the first time in weeks. "We should talk. Maybe we can work something out." But Evelyn didn't reply. She no longer needed him. Grant stared at his phone, realizing something horrifying. The person he once underestimated now held the power to destroy him. And Samuel Blake was about to accelerate his downfall. The courtroom was colder than usual on the morning of the second hearing. Evelyn sat quietly beside Samuel, her hands folded protectively over her belly, trying to steady her breathing. She had hardly slept the night before, replaying the fake audio in her mind. But Samuel had spent the entire night preparing, and when he placed a reassuring hand on the table, she felt her fear loosen just slightly. Grant and Madeline entered together, though they no longer walked in perfect sync. Madeline's hair wasn't as flawlessly styled as usual, and Grant's suit looked stiff, like he had dressed in a hurry. They avoided each other's eyes. Something between them had cracked. The judge took her seat. "Counsel, you may proceed." Samuel rose. Calm, precise, deadly. "Your Honor, before any further discussions about custody or emotional stability, the court must address the authenticity of the audio presented at the previous hearing." Grant stiffened. Madeline's jaw twitched. Samuel connected his laptop to the courtroom screen. "This file," he said, "was presented as evidence of Mrs. Hart threatening her husband. But after a forensic analysis, we discovered multiple splices." Gasps filled the room. Samuel clicked again. Metadata appeared on the screen. "And this is the most important part. The original device used to create the file." He stepped closer for emphasis. "It belongs to Miss Madeline Rhodes." The courtroom erupted. Madeline shot to her feet. "That's impossible. Someone must have." The judge held up a hand. "Miss Rhodes, remain seated." Madeline sank back down, visibly shaking. The judge leaned forward, fixing her with an unblinking stare. "Miss Rhodes," she said slowly, "why does the device used to produce this recording belong to you?" The room fell silent. Madeline opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face turned pale. She glanced at Grant, but he stared straight ahead, abandoning her without hesitation. The judge repeated, firmer, "Answer the question." Madeline's lips trembled. I don't remember. Maybe it was an old phone." "Enough," the judge snapped. "This court does not tolerate fabricated evidence." Evelyn felt her breath catch. For the first time, the weight pressing on her chest lifted. Samuel sat down beside her. "It's turning," he whispered. And he was right. The entire case had just flipped upside down. Chaos rippled through the courtroom after the judge's sharp reprimand, but Samuel wasn't finished. He stood again, buttoned his suit jacket with calm precision, and said, "Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to introduce additional evidence that further demonstrates a deliberate attempt to deceive this court." Grant visibly flinched. Madeline's breath caught. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Samuel clicked to the next slide. A split screen appeared on one side, a timestamp from the forged recording. On the other, live footage pulled from the preschool's security cameras. At the exact moment the audio claimed Evelyn was screaming threats, the video showed her inside the classroom, kneeling beside a group of toddlers, helping them stack wooden blocks. She wore a gentle smile. She looked calm, kind, safe. Nothing like the monster the audio tried to paint her as. The courtroom murmured. Even the stenographer paused for a heartbeat. Samuel spoke clearly, every word slicing through the silence. Mrs. Hart was at work, surrounded by witnesses. Under surveillance, the recording is not only manipulated, it is impossible. Madeline buried her face in her hands. Grant stared at the table as if hoping it would swallow him whole. The judge turned to Grant's attorney. "Do you have any explanation for this?" The attorney sputtered. We presented the evidence as it was given to us." "By whom?" the judge pressed. The attorney hesitated before reluctantly gesturing at Grant and Madeline. Evelyn felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from a new emotion she hadn't felt in months. Relief? Samuel faced the judge. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to character assassination and psychological abuse during her pregnancy. She deserves protection, not persecution." The judge nodded, expression softening as she looked at Evelyn. "Mrs. Hart, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Evelyn stood slowly, her belly shifting beneath her hands. Her voice trembled, but it was steady enough to carry. "I just want to protect my baby," she whispered. "I never wanted a war. I only wanted fairness." Something in the judge's face changed respect, empathy, maybe even admiration. Samuel sat down beside her, his voice low. "You spoke beautifully." But he knew the battle wasn't over yet, because the biggest secret, the one that could ruin Grant completely, was still waiting to be revealed. The judge barely had time to finish reprimanding Grant's legal team before Samuel rose again, calm but with an unmistakable edge sharpening his voice. Evelyn looked at him, confused. She thought the worst was already over. But Samuel wasn't done, not even close. "Your Honor," he said, sliding a thick folder across the table, "there is one more matter this court must address. A matter of financial integrity." Grant's head snapped up. Madeline stiffened beside him. Samuel opened the folder slowly, deliberately. "During the preparation for this hearing, we uncovered several unusual financial transfers connected to Mr. Bohr, Rhodes's company." He clicked to a new document on the courtroom screen, bank records, dates, and wire transfers highlighted in red. "These transfers," Samuel continued, "appear to have been routed through an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. An account Mr. Rhodes did not disclose during the divorce financial declaration." A stunned silence fell over the room. Grant's face drained of color. "This is absurd, Your Honor. He has no right to." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Rhodes." Samuel clicked again, revealing a spreadsheet. The total hidden amount exceeds $600,000. Not only is this a violation of divorce law, but it may constitute tax evasion and financial fraud. Madeline looked at Grant with widening eyes. "You told me you cleaned everything." "Shut up," Grant hissed, panic breaking through his voice. The judge leaned forward, voice tight. "Mr. Rhodes, did you or did you not fail to disclose these assets?" Grant swallowed hard. His hands trembled. I don't recall. Maybe it was a business error." Samuel cut in smoothly. "We also obtained statements from 2 former employees who confirmed Mr. Rhodes personally authorized the transfers." Gasps erupted again. Madeline stared at Grant, as if seeing him for the first time, not as a wealthy, powerful businessman, but as a sinking ship she had tied herself to. The judge's tone turned icy. "This court will open an immediate investigation. In the meantime, Mr. Rhodes, your credibility is severely compromised." Evelyn watched as Grant's world collapsed right there, in front of everyone. He had humiliated her, abandoned her, tried to destroy her. But now, he was the one drowning. Samuel sat down, whispering, "This is justice, Evelyn." For the first time, she believed him. And Grant Rhodes had only begun to fall. As the courtroom exploded with whispers and shock, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in months. Air. Real, full air filling her lungs instead of the tight, painful breaths she had been living on. Grant slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, and Madeline stared at him with the hollow eyes of a gambler who suddenly realized all her bets were on a losing hand. For the first time, Evelyn didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. She didn't feel like the trembling woman clutching medical bills in a cold hospital hallway. She felt steady. The judge called for a short recess. Evelyn stepped out into the corridor, leaning against the wall as her knees wobbled, not from fear this time, but from the shock of watching truth finally win. She placed both hands gently on her belly. "We're okay," she whispered to her baby. "We're finally okay." Samuel exited moments later, walking toward her with the calm stride of someone who had just navigated chaos and come out victorious. "You held yourself together in there," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Evelyn blinked, surprised. No one had said those words to her in a long time. "You did everything," she replied. Samuel shook his head. "No, I only gave the truth a voice. You survived everything that led up to this moment." Evelyn wanted to hug him, but she wasn't sure if it was from gratitude, fear, or something warmer she didn't dare name yet. She looked away, embarrassed by her own emotions. Then Grant stormed out of the courtroom, his face red, his hair messily out of place. "You think this is over?" he snapped, pointing a shaking finger at Evelyn. "You ruined me. You'll pay for this." Before Evelyn could react, Samuel stepped forward, his voice like steel. "If you speak to her like that again, I will file for an immediate protective order." Grant froze. He had never been challenged by someone stronger than him, and he wasn't prepared for it. Madeline emerged next, arms crossed, eyes cold. But even she didn't defend him. They were falling apart, and Evelyn wasn't the frightened wife anymore. She was rising, and her true power was only beginning to show. Madeline had always believed she was the smartest person in every room, the most composed, the one in control. But after the recess, as she followed Grant down the courthouse steps, her carefully polished world began to crack loudly, visibly, humiliatingly. Grant jerked away from her, fury radiating off him. "This is your fault," he hissed. "All of it. You said the recording was foolproof." Madeline's lips trembled. "You told me to make it. You begged me to help you win." "You didn't help you. Destroyed us," Grant spat. "Now they're digging into my financials because of you." Madeline grabbed his arm desperately. "Grant, listen." But he shook her off so violently she stumbled backward, catching herself on the cold metal railing. People passing by stared. Whispers followed them like smoke. She hated it. She hated being seen as weak. She hated that Grant was slipping away from her control. But above all, she hated that Evelyn's sweet, plain, quiet Evelyn was winning. Later, unable to accept the humiliation, Madeline spotted Evelyn alone in the parking structure. Samuel had stepped away to make a phone call. The concrete walls echoed with every footstep as Madeline approached, her heels clicking sharply. "Evelyn," she called out, voice brittle. Evelyn turned, instinctively shielding her belly. Madeline forced a trembling smile. We didn't mean for it to go this far." Things got messy. Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes were tired, guarded. Madeline's voice cracked. "If the judge charges me with evidence tampering, my career is over. My life is over. Please tell them I didn't mean any harm." Evelyn stared at her, stunned. "You tried to destroy me," she said softly. "You tried to take my child." Madeline's facade broke. Tears she never let anyone see spilled down her cheeks. "I just wanted a life that wasn't mine to have." Evelyn stepped back. There was no hatred in her expression, only a quiet, devastating truth. "You did this to yourself, Madeline." Madeline's knees buckled as she realized something she had never understood before. Not everyone needs to scream to win. Some people win simply by standing back up. And Evelyn was standing taller than ever. Grant Rhodes had spent most of his adult life believing consequences were for other people, not for him. Not for a man who wore tailored suits, drove a Mercedes, and commanded a company with a click of his Mont Blanc pen. But after the hearing, reality began collapsing around him faster than he could catch it. The first blow came the very next morning when he walked into his office. His employees weren't whispering, they were staring. Some avoided his eyes entirely, others looked at him with thinly veiled disgust. He'd been so confident no one would find out about his offshore stash, but rumors traveled faster than truth, and someone inside the courthouse must have talked. By noon, Grant received an email from the IRS requesting an official interview. He slammed his laptop shut, cursing under his breath. Then came the second blow, a contract cancellation from one of his biggest partners in Boston, citing concerns regarding transparency. His company's reputation wasn't just bruised, it was bleeding. When Madeline entered his office later that afternoon, she found him pacing like a trapped animal. "Grant, we need to calm down and think." "Think?" Grant barked. "I'm losing everything, because you couldn't keep your hands off that stupid recording." Madeline flinched, anger flashing in her eyes. "Don't you dare put this all on me. You're the one who hid the money." Grant snapped. "If you hadn't pushed me, I didn't make you betray your wife," she shot back, "or your child." The words struck deeper than she intended. Grant froze. For a moment, just a moment, shame flickered in his eyes, but it quickly twisted into rage. He stormed out of the office, drove aimlessly, and eventually called Evelyn. His voice shook with fury and desperation. "You think you've won? You think Samuel can save you? I'll fight you until I have nothing left." Evelyn, sitting on her couch with one hand over her belly, listened calmly. Then she said the sentence that shattered him more than any courtroom blow. "You already have nothing left, Grant." Silence followed. For the first time in his life, Grant understood what it felt like to be powerless. And Evelyn finally understood what it felt like to be free. For the first time in months, Evelyn woke up without feeling a weight crushing her chest. The world still held problems, bills, court dates, the uncertainty of pregnancy, but something inside her had shifted. She was no longer drowning. She was floating, slowly, painfully, but upward. 2 days after Grant's meltdown, Samuel invited her to his office on Park Avenue to prepare for the final hearing. The building stood tall against the Manhattan skyline, its glass exterior reflecting morning sunlight like a promise of something better. Evelyn felt underdressed walking into the lobby, but the moment Samuel met her at the elevator, she relaxed. His smile wasn't the polished, strategic smile of a lawyer. It was warm, gentle, steady. Inside his office, a Starbucks cup waited for her on the desk, her favorite order, though she didn't remember ever telling him. "You looked tired yesterday," he said softly, handing it to her. "I thought you might need this." Evelyn wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. No one had done something thoughtful for her in so long that it almost made her cry on the spot. Samuel noticed. "Sit," he said, voice lower. "You don't need to pretend with me." For the next hour, they reviewed documents, evidence lists, possible outcomes. But between the legal talk were small moments, Samuel picking up her pen when she dropped it, asking if her back hurt, offering a pillow for her chair. Little gestures that felt like stitches mending a torn heart. When they finished, he reached into a drawer and placed a book in front of her. Atomic Habits. "This helped me when my life fell apart a few years ago," he said. "It reminded me that healing is slow but real." Evelyn ran her hand over the cover. "Why are you helping me this much?" she asked quietly. Samuel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because you deserve someone in your corner. And because you remind me what strength actually looks like." Evelyn felt warmth rise in her chest, unfamiliar but comforting. Her life was still messy, still uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't walking through it alone. And without realizing it, something new began to bloom between them. Something neither of them expected. The morning of the final hearing felt unreal. Evelyn stood outside the New York family court, with her hands resting on her swollen belly, breathing in slow, steady breaths. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, melting the second they touched her coat. She didn't feel afraid this time, not with Samuel walking beside her, carrying his case files with the calm confidence of a man ready to finish what he started. Inside the courtroom, tension buzzed like electricity. Grant sat rigid, eyes red and hollow from sleepless nights. His expensive suit couldn't hide the cracks, sweat beading at his temples, fingers tapping nervously. Madeline looked worse. Her makeup, once flawless, now barely masked the fear beneath her shaking hands. Evelyn took her seat. Samuel stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, "today is not simply about divorce, but about justice. My client, a pregnant woman, was abandoned, lied about, and financially strangled during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life." He clicked to the forensic report on the screen. "We have proven the audio was fabricated." Another slide. "We have proven Mr. Rhodes concealed over $600,000 in assets." He paused, then added with quiet force, "And we have shown that Mrs. Hart has remained stable, responsible, and dedicated to the well-being of her unborn child." Grant shifted uncomfortably. Madeline clenched her jaw. Samuel continued, voice unwavering. "This court has witnessed an attempt to weaponize lies against a woman whose only fault was trusting the wrong man." The judge adjusted her glasses, eyes moving between the documents and the trembling couple on the opposite side of the room. Then she turned to Evelyn, really turned to her, and something softened in her expression. "Mrs. Hart," she said gently, "you have handled yourself with strength and dignity." Her gavel came down. "I hereby grant Mrs. Hart full physical and legal custody. Mr. Rhodes is ordered to pay long-term support due to financial misconduct. Miss Rhodes will be reported for submitting falsified evidence. Further investigations will proceed." Evelyn covered her mouth as tears poured down her cheeks, tears not of fear, but of release. Samuel placed a steadying hand on her shoulder as the courtroom erupted behind them. But Evelyn heard none of it. She had won, and her new life was finally beginning. And there was still one more surprise waiting outside those courtroom doors. When Evelyn stepped out of the courtroom, the cold winter air felt different, softer, kinder. She inhaled deeply, letting the weight finally lift from her shoulders. Samuel walked just behind her, ready to catch her if her legs gave out. She was crying, laughing, shaking all at once. Months of pain, fear, and humiliation had finally broken open into something she never expected. Peace. But then she froze. A familiar figure stood near the courthouse steps, leaning on a cane, bundled in a thick coat. Her father. "Dad?" Evelyn whispered, barely believing her eyes. Henry Hart smiled, a little wobbly but full of unmistakable pride. "I heard my girl won today." Evelyn rushed to him, carefully wrapping her arms around him without pressing her belly. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be resting." "Well," Henry chuckled, "someone drove to Scranton at dawn to pick me up." Evelyn blinked in confusion. "Someone?" She turned, and there he was, Samuel, standing a few steps back, hands in his pockets, pretending not to listen, even though he clearly was. "You did this?" she asked softly. Samuel shrugged, suddenly shy. "You shouldn't celebrate alone, and he deserved to see you win." Evelyn's lips trembled. No one had ever gone out of their way for her like that, not since her mother passed. Her father reached for Samuel's hand, gripping it firmly. "You're a good man," Henry said. "My daughter, she's been through hell. Don't let her walk the next part alone." Samuel swallowed hard. His usual composure cracked slightly as he looked at Evelyn, really looked at her. "I won't," he said quietly. Evelyn felt her heartbeat stutter. The world seemed to slow as Samuel took a hesitant step closer. "I know you have a lot to heal from," he said. "I know you're focused on the baby and your father and rebuilding your life. I'm not asking for anything right now. He took a breath. "I want to be here. For you. With you. However you'll let me." Her eyes filled again, this time with warmth, not sorrow. "Samuel." Her voice broke. Her father squeezed her hand. "He's not asking you to love him today, sweetheart. He's asking for a chance tomorrow." Evelyn nodded slowly, heart open for the first time in a long, long while. And a new beginning quietly took root in the winter air. The weeks following the final hearing felt like stepping into a different lifetime. Gone were the nights of crying alone, the fear of eviction, the constant pressure squeezing Evelyn's chest. Her world wasn't perfect, her father still needed checkups, her pregnancy aches were stronger now, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't surviving. She was living. With Grant's court-ordered support finally coming through, Evelyn moved into a modest but bright apartment in a safer neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing luxurious, just warm sunlight through big windows, clean carpets, and enough space to welcome her baby boy. She spent afternoons unpacking Amazon boxes with small baby essentials, soft blankets, tiny socks, a mobile with glowing stars. Each item felt like a promise of the peaceful life she never thought she would have. Samuel visited often, sometimes with legal documents, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but a small smile and 2 cups of Starbucks. He never pushed, never hovered. He simply showed up, quietly becoming part of her routine. When her father had a difficult night, Samuel drove them both to the doctor. When her back pain grew unbearable, he brought a heating pad and stayed until she fell asleep on the couch. One evening, after helping her assemble the crib, Samuel stepped back, wiping sawdust from his palms. "Looks like it'll hold," he joked. Evelyn laughed softly. "You didn't have to spend your whole evening here." He shrugged. "I wanted to." She looked at him, then really looked. His sleeves rolled up, collar slightly undone, hair a little messy from the work. Not polished, not perfect, just real, and safe, and hers, in a way that scared her, because it felt too good to be true. "You've done so much for me," she murmured. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me anything, Evelyn." His voice softened. "I'm here because I care, not because I expect something back." Her heart thudded painfully, beautifully. A life without fear, a home without shouting, a man who chose her without conditions. The kind of future she never imagined was taking shape, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. And she wasn't afraid of it anymore. Central Park was quiet that morning, the kind of winter calm where the world sounded softer, as if wrapped in cotton. Evelyn walked slowly along the path, her scarf tucked gently around her belly. Samuel kept pace beside her, hands in his coat pockets, careful not to walk too close, careful not to overwhelm her. He always seemed to know exactly how much space she needed and when she needed someone to step into it. They reached a bench overlooking the frozen lake. Evelyn lowered herself onto it with a tired sigh. Samuel sat a respectful distance away, watching her with that familiar, quiet concern. "You're doing better," he said softly. Evelyn looked down at her gloved hands. "Some days," she admitted. "Other days, everything hits at once. The divorce, the pregnancy, my dad's health. I feel like I'm held together with tape." Samuel nodded. "Healing isn't a straight line, and you've had to heal while surviving." He paused. "But you're still here." His words sank, deep, simple, steady, true. She swallowed, blinking away sudden tears. "I'm scared, Samuel. What if I'm not enough? What if I mess up as a mother? What if—" He turned fully toward her. "Evelyn." His voice was firm but warm. "You've already faced more than most people do in a lifetime, and you protected that baby through all of it. That doesn't make you enough. That makes you extraordinary." She let out a shaky breath, caught between wanting to believe him and fearing she couldn't. Then Samuel did something he had never done before. He reached out and gently took her hand. Not forceful, not hurried, just steady. "I know your life is complicated," he said. "I know your heart is tired. I know you're still healing. I'm not asking for anything big or fast." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, sending warmth all the way through her. "I'm just asking for a chance to walk beside you, to be someone you can lean on if you want to." Evelyn felt something melt inside her, something she thought had died long ago. She tightened her fingers around his small, hesitant, but real. "Then stay," she whispered. "Just stay." Samuel's smile was soft, relieved, full of something unspoken and growing. And for the first time in years, Evelyn let herself hope for love again. The morning her baby arrived, the world outside was blanketed in soft snow, the kind that made everything feel quiet and new. Evelyn clutched Samuel's hand as another contraction hit, her breath catching, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. He stayed right there with her, steady, unflinching, grounding her with calm words and the warmth of his palm. Hours later, when the cries of her newborn son filled the delivery room, Evelyn felt her heart break open in a way she never imagined. She held the tiny boy against her chest, his skin warm, his breath small and perfect. Her father sat nearby in a wheelchair, eyes glistening. "He's beautiful," Henry whispered. "Just like his mother." Samuel stood at the foot of the bed, hands clasped, eyes soft with awe. He didn't push closer. He waited for her to look up. When she finally did, she whispered, "Come, meet him." Samuel approached slowly, as if stepping into something sacred. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one trembling finger. "Hello, little guy," he murmured. "You picked one incredible mother." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Samuel, thank you for being here." "There's nowhere else I'd be," he said simply. Days later, as Evelyn settled into her apartment with her newborn, justice hit its final mark. Grant was charged with financial misconduct. His company publicly distanced itself from him. He faced penalties, audits, and a storm of professional fallout. Madeline, exposed for falsifying evidence, lost her job and reputation. They had built their power on lies, and it had all come crashing down. One quiet evening, Samuel visited, bringing dinner and the easiest smile. The baby slept in his bassinet, the apartment warm with soft lamplight. Evelyn felt a peace she never thought she'd know again. Samuel sat beside her, clearing his throat nervously. "I know your life is changing fast," he said, "but I'd like to be part of it, if you'll let me." Evelyn looked at him, this man who had walked through fire to protect her, who showed up without conditions, who loved her gently, patiently. "You already are," she whispered. Samuel took her hand. She squeezed back. A new family, a new future, a new beginning built on truth, kindness, and love. And Evelyn finally stepped into the life she always deserved, without fear, without pain, and without looking back. Here we are, my wonderful friends. The story has closed its final chapter. And if you're still here with me right now, listening to these last words, then something in Evelyn's journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own storms. Maybe it whispered that you, too, deserve a gentler life, a safer love, a new beginning. Stories like this remind us of a simple truth Marcus Aurelius wrote long ago: what stands in the way becomes the way. Evelyn's suffering didn't break her, it shaped her. Every betrayal, every tear, every lonely night became the very path that led her to justice, peace, and a love that honored her worth. And maybe that's the message for all of us. That healing is real. That endings can be beginnings. That kindness, whether from ourselves or from someone who chooses to stand beside us, can rebuild whole worlds. If this story touched you, even a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tap that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Thank you for being here. You matter more than you know.